Hello everybody, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Live at the Waterhole. And first up, we're in the Greater Kruger Park, the Olifants West Reserve and Cat Eye Pan. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and what does the bush hold in store for us today? Well, you'll have to sit back, relax and watch as the animals come down to quench their thirsts and cool off. And as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter, using the hashtag WildEarth. What is it that you'd like to see? What would you like to chat? Is wildlife related? Send it on through. Looks like we've got a middle-aged or so elephant bull here, just having a nice little drink. It does look rather overcast and maybe some chance of rain. I have heard reports of rain overnight in parts, so maybe it's going to carry on. That does bode well for potentially seeing some, maybe less elephants, but we'll take it, especially if we see some spots. That would be magnificent. And speaking of the weather here in these parts, I think it's time for us to go and have a look what the weather's going to be like across all the different locations. So a bit of a mixed bag, but it seems to be quite warm. Nonetheless, there is a little bit of rain about at some of the spots and a bit of overcast weather. But who knows what's going to happen today. This elephant seems rather relaxed. He's just put his ears out now, though. I wonder if he's just catching the breeze. And instead of flapping them, he's just using the wind. So Kim Faustino says, good evening at 7 p.m. here in the Philippines. Wow, lovely to have you on board with us, Kim. And I'm sure that it's nice and hot there, being very tropical. Then Joanne Mello says, hello, Ralph. Good to hear your voice today. And lovely to have you on board as well, Joanne. Welcome, welcome. He really is super relaxed, and I'm pretty sure that's exactly what he's doing with his ear flaps, just putting them out into the wind there. Lovely, easy way of keeping cool. So Mary Laure Ligo says hi and thank you from Belgium. Wow, we've got an international audience today, and lovely to have you on board as well, Marie. So I was just having to see exactly the population numbers of elephants in the Kruger Park and trying to find some up-to-date information. But according to Siyabona Africa, they say that this year the Elephant and Buffalo Census Team, under the leadership of Dr. Ian White, who is conducting his 24th census, counted 13,050 elephants in the Kruger National Park. Although Ian retired earlier this year, he was contracted to conduct the census. And the count indicates 623 individuals, or 5% more than the 1,227 counted last year. Ian says in his report that only 338 calves were recorded, which is considerably less than the 725 counted a couple of years ago. But as elephants have a long gestation time and intercalving period, a high calf percentage cannot be sustained year after year and is no cause for concern. According to the final report, of the total elephants counted, 1,816 were adult bulls and 11,234 were recorded in breeding herds. The western boundary fence, which separated Kruger from the associated private nature reserves and other provincial nature reserves, was removed in 1993. So the Sabi Sands has been the only exception, as they've chosen to conduct their own censuses, and the results for this and some other areas have been made available by Dr. Mike Peel of the Agricultural Research Council, part of the Limpopo National Park, bordering Kruger to the east, which was censused also a couple of years ago, but nothing recently. So quite interesting that the population is increasing and very healthy. So Questo asking how much does that or this elephant weigh? Questo, it's we can't obviously be exact because we'd have to pick it up with a crane and be able to weigh it. But we can, generally guess that I would say it's not a massive bull. It's reasonably sized, but it's not fully grown just yet. I would say it's still got a bit to go, filling out, etc. And those tusks could get quite a lot bigger. So I would say somewhere between 5 and 6 tons, 5 and 6,000 kilograms. That would be my educated guess, but somewhere in the zones. And Canine Girl saying, afternoon, Ralph. Looking forward to a great afternoon with you as always. Lovely to have you with us again, Canine Girl. Keep firing away those questions. An Orchid Factory asking, Ralph, when Ellies place their trunk in another's mouth, is that another way of communication? Absolutely, Orchid Fairy, and you'll very often see that it's subordinates, not always, but very often it's subordinates that put their trunk into the mouths of dominant animals, and particularly so with the bulls. You won't really see a big dominant bull putting his trunk into a subordinate bull's mouth. It's normally the other way around. You can also look at this kind of body language or behavior with dogs, domestic dogs. You normally see that dogs that lick at the mouth of another dog are subordinate to a dominant dog, whether it's male or female. So then you can actually start to understand the dynamics within the group if you pay attention to the behaviors that they exhibit towards each other. And this being no different with elephants and putting their trunks into others' mouths. And yes, very often in group when they come together, particularly at a waterhole, which is a convergence point for a lot of animals, both within the same species and alternate species as well. Generally, you don't have this kind of interaction between different species. It's normally within the same, and then you can pick up the dominance and hierarchy structure just by watching their behavior. And Liesel asking, do any animals look for shelter in rainy weather? Yeah, they do, Liesel. You see it particularly, and you see this elephant just putting its trunk that. Normally doing that, it's obviously sniffing in a particular direction and often can indicate when there's another arriving animal, very often an elephant. So who knows, maybe we'll have another one coming onto the scene here. But Animals that, when it's really inclement weather, like pouring with rain and so on, and very windy, the animals will very often go onto the leeward side of a hill, to get out of the wind and also move into the thickets, sometimes even down into valleys, etc. Elephants often do this. They get out of that weather, but, they can't get out of it completely, but it's just a lot more comfortable, I would say. And then the likes of predators, lions and leopards, etc., they very often go and sort of get into a thicket and try and get out of that weather a little bit. So yes, they do seek shelter to a degree, but obviously can't get out of it completely. And then the likes of warthogs, etc., when it's very cold, and they're burrowing animals, even surrogates, they'll go down into their burrows and sometimes even stay in there for a few days, a couple of days. Obviously they're getting the water in, but it's just the hunger that will drive them to go out. But we see with the warthogs often staying in their burrows late on into the day and only coming out for a quick feed before returning. They don't have a lot of fur, so I think they do get quite chilly. And then the likes of surrogates, we've often seen them in mongoose, from dwarf mongoose to banded mongoose, staying in their burrows later on until the sun comes out and it's nice and warm, and then they actually come out to feed. So a comment coming in from Asbo saying, "Afternoon, Ralph. Lovely picture. Makes a great painting. We could call it the Ponder Factor. The triumph of idleness over willpower." I like it, Asbo, especially when he puts his trunk up like that, smelling in the direction that the wind's coming from there, it seems like. And Tim Geek asking, do elephant bulls mainly live solitary lives? Is this one near its herd? So Tim Geek, exactly that. Elephant bulls, when they're around about, it's normally between 12 and 13 years of age or so, they start becoming boisterous in the breeding herd. And they also spend a lot more time at the water holes. When the breeding herds come through, they sort of stay. They're not quite as anxious as the females within the breeding herd. They start to lead a little bit more of a solitary life, just following up behind the herd. And when they do become boisterous around the little calves, the females sort of push them out and get angry with them. So slowly but surely then they start going off on their own. And sometimes joining up with other bulls. Sometimes it's siblings or from the same breeding herd. Other times they join up with an older bull, more experienced, and follow him around. So they can be by themselves, or they can form little bachelor herds. So we wouldn't say that at this age is part of any herd per se. It's probably solitary or with a couple of his mates. And they can leave each other and join up once again and so on. And then it's when they come into must that they will then have that increase in testosterone, and it will drive them to want to go and seek out the females and try to, mate with them as well. That's when they normally come into conflict with other bulls that are dominant, especially if they've come into must as well. Then there's problems, and there can be big fights, sometimes even leading to them killing each other. But that's when those younger bulls need to just be careful, because if there's another bull in must that's dominant, they're in a bit of trouble. But in some parts, that's why it's good for elephant bulls to have a staggered kind of must, and they don't have any set breeding season. I think they would really get into each other if there was a set period with all the bulls coming into must at the same time. There would be almighty fights, and I think we'd have a lot of die-off actually as a result of bulls killing each other. So with it being staggered and there being no real set period, it gives the bulls a chance to move into the herds with other bulls not being into must, and so there's quite a big avoidance of conflict with this kind of staggering of the must. And so it's also helps with genetic variation. So you have a number of different bulls that could potentially mate with the females because they come into must at different times. Now, Joanne Mello was referring to what I was chatting about, the elephant numbers increasing, and she's saying that that's also news for the Ellies now to have the cheetah and wild dog populations grow as well. Yes, it would be, Joanne. However, they obviously do have a bit of a problem with increasing their population because, they have such vast ranges and being such successful predators as well. You can't have too many because then you'll start having a decrease in the population of the prey species. But having a look on the interwebs, it says that today there's roughly 6,700 adult cheetah across 29 subpopulations left in the wild. I think that this is in total. And the two largest meta populations occur in East Africa and Southern Africa. And today in the Kruger National Park, there's an estimated 427 adult individuals. This obviously around cheetah, with the majority population found in the central and southern regions of the park. And then looking at the wild dogs, they say that there's fewer than 650 remaining in the wild. And obviously, wild dogs being such excellent predators, it's difficult for private reserves to keep wild dogs. So they're pretty much only in national parks and game reserves. And I know that, for instance, on the Karongwe Game Reserve, just outside of Hoedspruit, they had a pack of, I think it was 11 or 12 of them when I was working there quite a few years ago. But they killed 324 impala in 1 year. So they were literally eating too much, and the reserve was actually literally having to stock game just for the wild dogs to eat, and it became a little bit too expensive for them. So eventually they had to have them translocated because they just couldn't keep up. So sometimes being that specialist and that successful can actually lead to your demise. So, Canine Girl asking a very good question. Within a herd, if a female has reproductive issues, can this affect the dynamics? Yeah, I think I'm going to look a little bit deeper into it and see if there's any evidence-based stuff. But I already know off the top of my head that it can cause issues with the females if they don't become pregnant. And go through that cycle of mothering, etc., because that was a lot of the concerns around contraception. If the females don't become pregnant and fulfill that part and that role within the herd, that there are social issues between them, and it seems like they start to fragment and they have breakaway groups, etc., because it really doesn't seem that they kind of accept a female that's not giving birth and mothering, etc. So, yeah, there definitely is issues, but I'm going to look for some real evidence-based research on that and get back to you. So Questo TV asking, this elephant is not fully grown yet. Does he have a chance to be a dominant male in the group? Most definitely, Questo. But, his time will come. Once he gets bigger and he fills out, and it also in his character. But when they go into must, it almost doesn't matter what their character is. It literally gets overridden by that. It's so much testosterone. So it just leads them to want to be dominant. But yeah, every bull is different. Some of them don't get as big as others. So there can be the potential of there being a real dominant force in the area. Maybe this elephant bull would just need to move to another zone where he could potentially find a breeding herd where there's no dominant males, or at least ones that he could dominate. But it will come in time. I think he's got a few years to go yet before he could be a dominant figure. But like I say, it works in their advantage that they don't come into must at the same time. So even though he's not a dominant male, if the other dominant males in the area are not in must and not seeking out the females when he comes into must, he could still have a chance of getting some of the females for himself during that period, which helps the elephants pass on their genetics, even though there are other dominant males around. All right, so lovely start here with this solitary elephant bull, just enjoying a nice quiet drink at Cat Eye. But I think it's time for us to change of place. Let's head to Kenya and Old Donyo. With a much bigger elephant bull this time. What a picture. And such a lovely perspective from this Old Donyo camera, almost down at ground level. You can see a Maasai giraffe off there in the background, ruminating. So, in looking for some evidence of the social impact of what happens with females within the herd if they don't give birth, I haven't quite found anything about that just yet, as it looks like there's a fringe-eared oryx there just underneath this elephant bull in the background, with a superb starling also coming in for a drink. But I haven't found anything just yet, but I have found a lovely write-up by Green Gurneys who speak of life lessons from lady elephants. They say elephants as a species have a lot to teach us. Herds have deep family ties lasting generations. Not surprising, as elephants feel a full range of emotions like empathy and fear. Naturalists, scientists, and nature photographers have captured an incredible social dynamic called an elephant circle. The female elephants know how to rally around their tribe of women. When a female elephant is giving birth, the other females gather in a circle around her, protecting her and her baby in this vulnerable state. When the baby is born, the females trumpet and cheers during this important moment. Likewise, when a female elephant is injured, the circle once again forms. As fierce protectors, when a sister is down, they gather around her. Shoulder to shoulder, the elephants stomp and kick up dust, daring any predator to try and attack one of their own. I think that's lovely little write-up, and I've seen this in person, both when females are giving birth and when there's potential problems. I had one such case at a waterhole in Etosha, when a little baby calf had fallen in a water trough. It was from an old farm, or they had built it, to have permanent water for the elephants, but a concrete trough, and the baby fell in there. Well, went in to drink, but slipped and was stuck in it. And there were a lot of animals around, but as you know, the elephants do generally dominate the water, the point itself. You see another bull coming into the scene. And so they all gathered around. They were in a tight circle, and then there were what I like to call the bodyguards, the younger females that go off and chase every animal in the vicinity away. and trumpeting and kicking up the dust and literally, like that little write-up said, daring anyone to take a chance, while the main sort of group were working to try and get this baby out of the waterhole. Eventually they did, but we couldn't even see the baby. Such was the circle so tight around it that they sort of shuffled off in the circle. You could just see the tiny little legs in the middle, but a very tight circle did they form. And nobody was going to mess with them in that state, that was for sure. But just a wonderful example of how they do protect their own. Not so much with the bulls. They're pretty much every man for himself, and it's more so in those breeding herds and the females that look after each other. Diane from the UK, welcome aboard once again, saying good morning, Ralph. The colors are absolutely stunning with these clouds and the sun. Yeah, it is. It's always pretty here. Lots of greenery as well, as always, being very tropical. The one downside is that we still can't see Mount Clara off in the background. Just too many clouds around. Now, I think going back to the previous bull that we saw at Cat Eye Pan in the Greater Kruger, Tim was asking, is a bull this size a target for lions? You said it is between 5 and 6 tons. If alone, what are the chances that it would survive an attack by lions? Or do lions mainly target smaller or younger elephants? Yes, Tim, generally so. It depends on the size of the pride of lions, because we know that super prides, 30 plus, have even been known to specialize in hunting adult elephants, particularly the lone bulls. It's not a pretty sight. They pretty much start eating the elephant alive, all on the rump, hanging on it and biting into its back and spinal cord. Eventually, the elephant pretty much dies of exposure, and from shock, rather than actually being put out. Because if the lions come anywhere near the head, they're going to get swatted, both by that trunk. Oh no, it's not a oryx, it's actually a gazelle. So there's potential for lions taking out a younger bull like that, definitely, but they'd have to work together, and it's really a high risk, because even that elephant bull would be able to kill lots of lions. If they got around its head, that's when they would really be in trouble. And this being a Grant's gazelle, not the more common that we see in the Thompsons. He's got a lovely set of horns on him. Try and get the focus onto the gazelle himself, but while we're doing that, from Wikipedia, Grant's gazelle, or the Nanja grantii, is a relatively large species of gazelle antelope distributed from northern Tanzania to South Sudan and Ethiopia, and from the Kenyan coast to Lake Victoria. Its Swahili name is Swala grantii. It was named for a 19th century British explorer, James Grant. They're genetically related to the Sumering's gazelle and the Thompson's gazelle, with Sumering's gazelle being the closer relative. They show high genetic variation among its populations, although there is no geographic isolation. And the differentiation of the species may have evolved during repeated expansion and contraction of arid habitats during the late Pleistocene era, in which populations were possibly isolated. So the Grant's gazelle was formerly considered a member of the genus Gazella within the subgenus Nanja, before Nanja was elevated to genus status. Obviously a bit scientific there, not everybody understanding, but we speak of a genus and the species, which is the particular animal we're speaking of. The American Society of Mammalogists granted full species to Bright's gazelle and the Peters gazelle. So there's a number of different gazelle when we speak of them. This bull having an interesting scratch there. I can't quite make out if it's just the water that he sprayed in under himself or if I think it might just have been that. I don't know if he's in must. And just like that, it looks like he may be moving off. But sometimes they're a bit indecisive. It seems like they want to move off, and then they turn around and come back for more. And what a beautiful sight that is as well, with the contrast of their sort of leopard-like spot pattern with this greenery in the background and a little bit of a touch of blue in the sky. Now, not the topic of what we're looking at, but Starbuck has asked the question, how do we know the low-frequency communication between elephants? And I found a bit of a write-up on physics.org, and they say that a research associate in the Stanford University School of Medicine, O'Connell Rodwell, came to one of Africa's premier wildlife sanctuaries to explore the mysterious and complex world of elephant communication. She and her colleagues are part of a scientific revolution that began nearly 2 decades ago with the stunning revelation that elephants communicate over long distances using low-pitched sounds that are barely audible to humans. And in 1997, O'Connell Rodwell took this discovery in a bold new direction by proposing that low-frequency calls also generate powerful vibrations in the ground, seismic signals that elephants can feel and even interpret via their sensitive trunks and feet. And scientists have long known that seismic communication is common in small animals, including spiders, scorpions, insects, and a few vertebrate species such as white-lipped frogs, kangaroo rats, and golden moles. Seismic sensitivity also has been observed in elephants, huge marine mammals, not related to elephants at all. But O'Connell Rodwell was the first to suggest that a large land of sending and receiving vibrational messages. A lot of research has been done showing that small animals use seismic signals to find mates, locate prey, and establish territories. But there have only been a few studies focusing on the ability of large mammals to communicate through the ground. Her insights generated international media attention after the December 26, 2004 tsunami disaster in Asia, following reports that trained elephants in Thailand had become agitated and fled to higher ground before the devastating wave struck, thus saving their own lives and those of the tourists riding on their backs. Because earthquakes and tsunamis generate low-frequency waves, O'Connell Rodwell and other elephant experts have begun to explore the possibility that the Thai elephants were responding to these powerful events. Elephants may be able to sense the environment better than we realize, she says, pointing to earlier studies showing that elephants will sometimes move towards distant thunderstorms. When it rains in Angola, elephants 100 miles away in Etosha National Park start to move north in search of water. It could be that they're sensing underground vibrations generated by the thunder. So I think even though they've been sort of studying this over, the last couple of decades, I still think that there's a lot to be done, but there is real evidence that not only do they use low frequency to communicate directly, but even through the ground as well with the vibrations that they pick up. And I know that there was evidence when there used to still be culling going on in the Kruger National Park that elephant populations in the south exhibited extreme agitation when there was culling operations going up in the north, which is a couple of 100 kilometers away. And so, well, maybe not that far, but there was definite correlation between the activity and the murdering of their compatriots up in the north. How could they know other than being able to actually feel it or hear it or sense it in some way without them actually getting direct communication? And now the gazelle also getting a chance to come in for a drink. So the gazelle finished his drink and backs off from the water, but I think it's not quite done just yet. And it looks like that bull giraffe is pursuing what looks like a female. I think he wants to try and mount. They're just showing a bit of affection to the female, but I don't think she's too receptive currently. So, and we've spoken of this before, where normally with the mammals, the males will go to where the females have urinated and smell it and lick it on the ground. But with giraffe and them having the real obstacle of the difficulty of getting to the ground, it's different with them in that you've just witnessed there, the male sort of touches around the genitalia, and then she spreads her leg and normally has a little bit of a pee and urinates while he's standing, so he doesn't need to put his head all the way down to the ground. And that's just what she's done there. So maybe she's a little bit more receptive than I thought. And then he would obviously flexing the vomeronasal organ in the phlegm grimace, and that will be interpreting her urine and her status of ready for mating, and that will be sending the message to the brain. So I wonder what he's picked up. Well, it's enough for him to go for a drink afterwards, so maybe he doesn't stand a chance. Now, Questo TV was asking, have you seen painted dogs take down a giraffe? I haven't, Questo TV. I'm sure they could take down a baby giraffe. That is definitely on the cards, but they've got to get past the very protective mother and her kick. So we've seen lions do this. Even I personally have seen a leopard that's had a baby giraffe up a tree in the Masai Mara here in Kenya. It's the largest prey that I've ever seen a leopard up in a tree with, but I must say it was a huge leopard, the biggest I've ever seen. and the mother was still walking around watching as the leopard was busy eating her offspring, and she could do nothing about it. Um, so, as I say, adult giraffe definitely taken down by lions, but I think it's a little bit too much to ask for wild dogs. You would probably see them hanging on the legs and get kicked off. So, very high risk to take on a giraffe. Um, but with lions, big prides, they generally like to take on those big risks because there's high reward. And then they don't need to spend much time hunting for the next while after killing something as big as that. So Diane from the UK saying, first time I've ever seen a Grant's gazelle. I think I now have a new favorite antelope. They are very special, are the Grant's gazelle. One of my favorite too. So glad we got you to see one for the first time. Fabulous. Now this little dance going on here, it is a bit of a mating dance, and it can carry on for hours and sometimes even longer than that. Uh, It doesn't normally just happen, but who knows? We might get lucky here. And I've noticed that I've seen this quite regularly next to waterholes when males are trying to mate with females. Uh, and it seems like they keep on trying to round the female back up towards the water because then once they do have her next to the water, then she doesn't really have anywhere to go, and then you can sort of keep her there a bit easier than you see this bit of cat and mouse play that's going on here. So Bill the Bull asking, Ralph, are giraffe monogamous? The easy answer to that, Bill, is no. They're polygamous, and they pretty much have a loose association, social structure. So there's not even really any herd dynamics with giraffes. They are quite sociable, but they'll mix and match as different males and females move in and around. So I kind of like to call them the hippies of the bush because there's free love all around. And it seems to be getting very dark. I wonder if we're going to see some rain shortly. All right, always lovely time spent here at Old Donyo, but I think it's time to change of place and let's go back to South Africa, but this time just on the border of Botswana and African Tau. Always a lovely scene here too, but very different to the tropical region of Kenya at Old Donyo. This being semi-arid. We've got a blue wildebeest bull, most likely, just ruminating on his own there, and then a couple of waterbuck. Seems to both be females. Always fantastic birding here. Jeepers, this waterhole has really dried up. I'm glad there's still some water about, but I hope they're going to be filling it up. Looked like there was a great egret, of course the common resident blacksmith lapwings, just about at every waterhole. Pretty quiet today. But there's a real ebb and flow at the different waterholes. Here we often have zebra, big herds, wildebeest, lots of warthogs, sometimes even baboons, elephants. There's our elephant. Looks like a reasonably young bull, just like a cat eye. Bit of a steep embankment there, difficult for him to get down to the water. Maybe he's going to move off onto the right, where it's a bit easier to get access. So it looks like some rain clouds in the background. This is one of the spots that really needs the rain. So if it rains anywhere today, I wish that it rains in Madikwe. So stepping right down into the water, making life a bit easier for himself. So I'm going to continue on a little bit reading through this article by physics.org because it's just got some wonderful information about elephants, but it's quite long, so I'll break it up as we go along. But just watching this elephant, I think it's fantastic to share. And we continue on with O'Connell Rodwell, the scientist, who says that elephants don't just feel the vibes, they also transmit vibrational signals through the ground, long-distance seismic messages that could play a crucial role in their survival and reproductive success. They're sending out signals to potential mates far away, or maybe they can tell if a predator is in the vicinity by picking up seismic cues from a distressed herd. And these underground may not be deliberate transmissions, but rather the byproducts of intense low-frequency sounds produced when elephants run, charge, and vocalize. And in the mid-1980s, scientists Katie Payne, Joyce Poole, and their colleagues discovered that elephants emit a variety of infrasounds, calls too low in pitch to be heard by most humans. In 1989, Payne and her colleagues conducted a landmark experiment at a waterhole in Etosha, demonstrating that these powerful infrasonic rumbles contain specific messages that can be heard and understood by other elephants more than 2 miles away. Several years later, environmentalist scientist David Larom and his co-workers proposed that under ideal atmospheric conditions, low-frequency calls could travel 6 miles or more through the air. Now in private industry, Larom has long been intrigued by O'Connell Rodwell's work. This is important basic research, he says. Like all creatures, humans perceive with limited spectra and sensory modes. We bias research with the unconscious and incorrect assumption that other animals see the world as we do. Every time we would discover otherwise, it expands the horizons of scientific knowledge and sends us the humbling and vital message that we are not, after all, the measure of all things. Now, Larom met O'Connell Rodwell in Etosha in 1992, the year she began her work at Mushara, and started doing research on elephants for the Namibian Ministry of Wildlife and Tourism. And she was looking for ways to help farmers keep elephants away from their crops, and wanted to see if there was something about elephant behavior, particularly their vocalizations, that we could use as a deterrent. Having just earned a graduate degree in entomology at the University of Hawaii, Manoy, Rodwell noticed something about the freezing behavior of elephants' 6-ton bulls that reminded her of the tiny insects back in the lab. I did my master's thesis on seismic communication in plant hoppers, she says. I'd put a male plant hopper on a stem and play back a female call, and the male would do the same thing the elephants do. He would freeze, then press down on his legs, go forward a little bit, then freeze again. It was just so fascinating, and it's what got her to think maybe there's something else going on other than acoustic communication. So in 1995, she was accepted to the doctoral program in ecology at UC Davis and began working with Professor Lynette Hart, an authority on the social behavior of large mammals. Their first goal was to prove to themselves and to the scientific community that elephants actually have the physical capability to send and receive low-frequency vibrations. But to do that, they had to convince physical geophysicists like Hart's brother, Byron Aronson. And it's a unique collaboration, and they started with the physics of it, then moved to behavior and how the animals would respond. So over the next 5 years, they conducted experiments with captive elephants in the United States, Zimbabwe, and India. Using geophones buried in the soil, the scientists were able to confirm that low-frequency rumbles and mock do indeed generate measurable seismic waves that travel along the surface of the ground. And in 1999, the UC Davis team developed a mathematical model that low-frequency vibrations have the potential of traveling up to 20 miles in the ground, potentially 3 times further than airborne calls. And a year later, after earning a doctorate at UC Davis, O'Connell Rodwell moved to Stanford, where she designed a series of studies to test the model. And in 2003, while working in a lab of Stanford geophysics, Professor Simon Klemperer she and her colleagues conducted a rigorous experiment with a trained male elephant held in captivity in Salinas, California. Several dozen geophones were used to monitor the scientific waves generated each time the bull vocalized. And the results indicated that elephant vibrations are unlikely to travel more than 2 miles in the soil, not 20 as previously estimated. So why the discrepancy? Geology may be one reason. Seismic waves move at different speeds in different soils. In Salinas, vibrations race through the ground at 1,300 feet a second, twice as fast as in Etosha National Park, because lower seismic waves maintain their integrity longer. It is possible that elephant vibrations in Etosha would travel farther or further than in Salinas. So after they did the Salinas study, they realized that there were other things like noise and wind that hadn't been taken into account. So Salinas is a farming area with a lot of tractor and generator noise in the background, but Etosha is a very quiet seismic environment, so they're hoping to get a more realistic assessment of how far elephant vibrations propagate in Namibia. And I must say that elephants definitely do seem to enjoy their own company, the bulls that is. They're quite comfortable on their own. Sometimes when they just leave the herd, they do sort of, they're not quite as sure by themselves, so that's why I think they seek out some older bulls. Now, scientists believe that an elephant's ability to converse over long distances is essential for its survival, particularly in a place like Etosha. And you could say the same for Kruger National Park and wherever else, actually. But in Etosha, where more than 400 savanna elephants range over an area larger than New Jersey. So elephants live in matriarchal breeding herds made up of mothers, aunts, and their offspring. Once males reach puberty around the age of 12, they get kicked out and start traveling alone or forming small bachelor herds, as we've discussed. The search for a mate in this vast wilderness is further complicated by the elephant's reproductive biology. Females breed when they are in estrus, a brief period of ovulation that only occurs every 2 years and only lasts a few days. So females in estrus make these very low, long calls that bulls home in on because it's such a rare event. And these powerful estrus calls carry more than 2 miles in the air and may be accompanied by long-distance seismic signals. Breeding herds also use low-frequency vocalizations to warn of predators. And adult bulls and cows have no enemies except for humans, and as I've said, sometimes with super prides of lions. But young elephants are susceptible to attacks by lions and hyenas. And when a predator appears, older members of the herd emit intense warning calls that prompt the rest of the herd to clump together for protection and to flee the scene. In 1994, O'Connell Rodwell recorded the dramatic cries of a breeding herd threatened by lions at Moshara Waterhole in Etosha. And the elephants got really scared, and the matriarch made these very powerful warning calls. And then the herd took off screaming and trumpeting. Since then, every time they've played that particular call that they obviously recorded at the waterhole, they get the exact same response, and the elephants take off. Now, reacting to a warning call played in the air is one thing, but what if the elephant could only feel the calls through the ground? To find out, the research team devised an experiment using an electronic shaker that converts acoustic sounds into vibrations. The device was brought to Mashara in 2002 and buried near the Waterhole. Using long wires, the researchers connected the shaker to a tape deck installed in the upper level of the observation tower 100 yards away. This shows the technology in 2002. But every time a herd showed up at the Waterhole, O'Connell Rodwell would pop a tape of the 94 warning call into the deck, and the underground shaker would play it back as a seismic vibration. To make sure the elephants were feeling the call, not hearing them, phones were installed above the ground so researchers could monitor all low-frequency sounds in the air. And the results of the 2002 study showed that elephants do indeed detect warning calls played through the ground. And they expected them to clump up into tight groups and leave the area, and that's in fact exactly what they did. But since they only played back one type of call, they can't really say whether they are interpreting it correctly. Maybe they thought it was a vehicle or something strange instead of a predator warning. So not ultimately conclusive, still showing a lot of signs that they do obviously communicate through the ground. So, I was going to say that always nice to get a close-up of these individual elephants and just see them for their individual character. Look at his long eyelashes. And when we're nice and close, you also see how much hair they actually have, that you don't see from a distance. So continuing on the seismic research, and although still in its infancy, it really may ultimately have important applications for elephant conservation. One goal of the studies and experiments conducted was to develop a remote census technique using geophone arrays to count elephants and other animals. And I'm sure now with the technology and smartphones, I think that this could go a whole lot further. But the research team discovered that the footfall of a large animal produces a unique signature visible on a spectrogram, making it easy to tell if an elephant, rhino, or giraffe has walked by. And they think that we can tell the difference between elephants and other species based on the spectral content of their footstep as they pass by a geophone array. The idea is to have a geophone array that could be left in the ground for a month at a time, recording data without anybody having to be there, and hoping that they could be deployed at remote waterholes or ideally in Central Africa where it's hard to conduct an aerial census because of the dense forest canopy. And this just reminds me when I was on site at Juma, when I was permanent there in 2017, we actually had a scientist that had come that they were busy with the project. It was designed to use smartphones, and what they would do, I think it was in the Amazon rainforest. It was in a rainforest somewhere around the world, in tropical rainforest. And what they were trying to pick up was when people were illegally deforesting, so chopping down trees, but they normally would use chainsaws. So they would put smartphones around in the forest, but what they would do previously was take a number of different sounds, and you can analyze it on a spectrogram. No matter how far away that sounds, if it can be picked up by the phone and put onto a spectrogram, that same signature will always be present, but you would just have to magnify it, but it would be the exact same signature of a chainsaw. Whether it's close or far away, the signature remains the same. So they could then analyze and also pick up which direction that chainsaw noise was coming from many kilometers away, and be able to do that remotely and send people into those areas to obviously for policing of these areas. And the outcome, I'm not sure what the real outcome was, but this was the kind of technology that was now already available in 2017. So now 2022, 2023, 2024, I think there's a lot of study potential with the technology that we do have that could take it really to the next level. And we were doing the same with Safari Live when we were using not the infrared cameras, but with the drone and the FLIR cameras. So you could see the wildlife at night from high up in the sky, but obviously being very far, you could do the same that they were doing with the audio signatures as we were attempting to do with the visual signature of whether or not it's a hyena, a lion, a leopard in a tree, or whatever it might be, so that you could, once you've got that onto an AI program and you give it 30 of those pictures, it would then be able to eventually tell you what it is. So you tell the technology 10 times that that's what a leopard in a tree looks like, and then thereafter it can tell you when it picks up a leopard in a tree or a hyena or whatever it might be. So exciting times ahead for conservation and mixed in with technology, I would say. Looks like another young bull's arrived. Maybe they're going to have a bit of a wrestling match. So just something interesting as well on elephants is that, did you know the average weight for an elephant heart is about 12 to 21 kilograms, and it comprises of about 0.5% of the animal's total body weight. They also have an atypical shaped hearts, and it beats around 30 times a minute. The blood vessels are wide and can withstand very high blood pressures, which is also interesting. And now a third, probably bull, has also arrived. You hear the little blue wax balls calling. Very high pitched little squeaky noise. So a question from Nora, and asking, can elephants get heart attacks? So Nora, according to Sand Parks, they say that due to their longevity, older elephants also suffer from conditions associated with old age, such as cardiovascular disease, and they then are liable to heart attacks and strokes, just like we are. So I think when we find elephants that have died and it's deemed that they died of natural causes, I think in many cases it would be down to something like a stroke or a heart attack. I think that might be a little croaking testicular that's calling. That little croaking noise. So I think also just going a little bit further into elephant biology, and we spoke of the heart, but let's speak on the rest. and also according to Sandparks, they say that the brain of an adult elephant is the largest of any land mammal and weighs 4 to 6 kilograms. This is about 1% of its entire body mass. And although human brains are a lot lighter, about 1.5 kilograms, they make up a greater proportion of body weight, 2%. The temporal lobes, known to function as memory centers, are quite large in elephants as well. Might explain their long memories. Like humans, elephant babies have much smaller brains than those of adults. And in most mammals, a newborn brain is around 90% the size of an adult. And in elephants, it's 35%, and in humans, it's 26%. So this probably explains the remarkable learning ability of young elephants. And that also, for me, is what we learned is a sign of an intelligent creature, or how you can measure intelligence. There's obviously many ways to do this, but one of the defining factors is how much your brain has the ability to grow from when you're born to when you're an adult. And there we're showing that humans have the biggest growth in the size of the brain from when they're an infant to when they're an adult. Elephants are not far behind that, and obviously also shows them their intelligence. And a lot of the intelligent animals have the same features. If we look at the likes of ostrich, which I would say is on the other end of the spectrum, where its eyes are bigger than its brain, and their brain grows very, very little from when they hatch to when they're an adult. And I think it does reflect then in their intelligence as well. Some might say that ostriches aren't silly, they're not stupid, but I beg to differ. And I don't mean that in any nasty way, but they're not very intelligent creatures, having spent many times with a lot of time with them, and also helped in rear some. Yeah, they're quite special, but lovely nonetheless. Now the stomach. Only about 44% of the food that it eats is actually successfully digested. The rest is excreted. Take a close look at some elephant dung and you'll see undigested grass, seeds, and other plant matter. Sometimes things just pass straight through. There's not any digestion of it at all. Elephants can eat for around 16 hours a day, and a large bull needs about 300 kilograms of food each day. It depends on the nutrition status of the food ingested, but yeah, somewhere in that area. And an elephant excretes up to 150 kilograms of waste a day, and that's dry waste, and they expel about 50 liters of urine every day as well. So the small and large intestines may reach a combined length of 35 meters. And as food works its way through the system, it can take 24 hours to digest their food. They take about 4 to 5 breaths per minute when lying or very calm, and this increases to 10 breaths per minute when standing or active. At rest, humans take between 12 to 20 breaths per minute. The lungs attach directly to the chest cavity and to the diaphragm, and unlike other animals which use pressure changes to breathe in and out, elephants use muscles to inflate and deflate their lungs. So Patrice McGargan saying, "Hi Ralph, these elephant bulls appear to be very differently behaved when meeting up at this waterhole than at others." Patrice, I'm not noticing much out of the ordinary. I think initially there were a couple of younger bulls, so they were a little bit more boisterous and playful, and you'll find that with the younger of the species. And that's probably across the board, normally more playful, more engaging. And the older they get, I think they're a little bit more standoffish, because when they start to play like that, it is a young individual's thing to do, is play. The adults don't generally take part in play as much. It's quite a rare occurrence. They love playing in the water, but playing with each other, especially as big adult bulls, has and runs the risk of injury. And injury in the bush can often lead to death. So it's a high risk to be engaging in that kind of activity. And so you don't generally see the bulls doing it unless they really mean business, i.e., engaging in a proper wrestle with each other. It's more the youngsters, and it helps with that play. I think it's a natural phenomena across the different species to obtain the muscle memory that is required for when it's really needed. When the adults fully grown and they need to fight for dominance and mating rights. So we see a little bit of a change in behavior when we have these youngsters. When we look at Old Donyo, it's mainly old bulls there, and it's like an old boys club. They're engaging in conversation, but not too much engagement in physical sort of wrestling and an activity that engages with each other. Quite so like with the youngsters. As you can see there's still that youngster there who wants to play. So the older bulls, not so much. But I wouldn't say that it's unusual what's going on here. It's just the different age groups, I think, that we're witnessing. At Old Donyo, as I say, a much older age on those bulls we're seeing right now. So a nice question came in from Shamrock asking, I wonder if whales have similar sized brains and hearts to elephants. And that got me thinking, Shamrock. So I went about trying to find any articles comparing whales and elephants. And I found a nice little write-up from engines.egr. And they say that whales and elephants have the largest brains of any creature. By the way, large brains don't necessarily go with large body sizes. Dinosaurs had much smaller brains than whales or elephants, and so too does the huge rhinoceros. A recent article in the American Scientist magazine tells us that whale and elephant behavior is not only complex, it's also alike in both species. Here's a quote. The females of either species live in a highly social family unit that rely on well-developed communication. The males live separate, more solitary lives, roving between female groups during breeding season, delaying breeding until they are large and dominant. Yet those matriarchal family groups, as well as the loosely organized bands of males, are marked by physical contact and care for one another. Groups of whales or of elephants spend many hours a day together, rubbing up against one another, caressing each other with flippers or with trunks, and quietly talking amongst themselves, or like these youngsters, having a little bit of a wrestling match. The conversation among sperm whales takes the form of patterned sets of clicks, whose frequencies can vary from 200 to 32,000 hertz. The elephants use a very low frequency sound, below the threshold of human hearing, to speak to one another. There are other human qualities as well. Both species live to the age of about 60. Both almost certainly remember lost events, and individuals of both species act heroically to protect other members of their group. Like humans, whales and elephants are adaptable. Their diets, like ours, are varied and flexible. During the Miocene epoch, various kinds of elephants lived everywhere on Earth except Australia and Antarctica. Sperm whales today range the oceans from Antarctica to Greenland. So lots of similarities, and I think just from the, from the evidence, they say that elephants pass the mirror test, which has been in the past used to measure IQ. Dolphins, they've managed to work out that they also pass the mirror test, and they reckon that whales would do the same, but we'd have to find a mirror big enough. You see that pushing and shoving, and they can often mount each other as well. Real acts of dominance, that. A real thinking pose from an elephant when they pull that trunk up like that and just put the tip of it facing forward. And there's another one entering the fray. Oh, looks like he bit off a little bit more than he could chew with that bigger elephant. The other one looks like he's had enough. That was too much rough play for him, and he's out of there. So yesterday I spoke on and touched on the topic of some myths. We were speaking about jaws and the fear that it's put into humans around sharks. And then I sort of mentioned about elephants eating peanuts and being scared of mice. And I wondered where this myth actually came from. And I found a lovely article from the Elephant Sanctuary South Africa written by Linda Chevelle. And she's saying, are elephants really scared of mice? And if you think there's no way a huge elephant could fear a mouse, you'd be correct, sort of. From the movie Dumbo to Saturday morning cartoons, the image of an elephant cowering from a minuscule mouse is pretty well established. But the elephant's fear has more to do with the element of surprise than the mouse itself. Theories abound that elephants are afraid of mice because the tiny creatures, and this fight's getting a little bit more hectic now, So, theories abound that elephants are afraid of mice because the tiny creatures nibble on their feet or can climb up into their trunks. However, there's no evidence to back up either of these claims. The mouse in the trunk myth, for example, seems to date back centuries to the ancient Greeks, who reportedly told fables about a mouse that climbed into an elephant's trunk and drove it crazy. Some have said that the claim started with Pliny the Elder in AD 77. As reported by Discovery Mythbusters. I think the myth arose by the idea of the mouse crawling up the elephant's trunk and nostrils, but that is absurd because the elephant could easily simply blow and eject the mouse, said elephant expert Richard Lair, who has researched elephants for 30 years, and he's published multiple studies on their behavior and is national advisor to the Thai Elephant Conservation Center. And that's in the very unlikely case that the mouse could make it up the elephant's nostrils anyway. It's more likely that elephants which have relatively poor eyesight simply become startled when mice dart past them. In the wild, anything that suddenly runs or slithers by an elephant can spook it, said Josh Plotnick, a researcher of elephant behavior and intelligence at the University of Cambridge in England. It doesn't have to be a mouse. Dogs, cats, snakes, or any animal that makes sudden movements by an elephant's feet can startle it. And I've seen this many times as well. Not from dogs and cats, but any animals moving in and around elephants does startle them if they haven't seen it coming or smelt them or heard them before it's right near to them. So John Hutchinson, a researcher at the Structure and Motion Lab of the Royal Veterinary College in London, agrees. Elephants get a bit nervous sometimes when small fast animals are around them. He said, and I can remember one occasion when a local dog in Thailand was running around while we were working with an elephant for their locomotor studies. The elephant really did not like the barking, sprinting animal around it, especially when it couldn't see where the dog was. The elephant panicked and ran off into the nearby jungle. So, elephants are not scared of mice, as some myths suggests. However, they are scared of ants and bees. So Sandy Franklin was asking how many inches on elephants' feet. Sandy Franklin, we don't work in imperial, we work in metric, so I'm not really accustomed with inches. But what I can tell you is that we used to often do this with tracking. When you find an elephant's footprint, you can take, we used to use a piece of string or a nice flexible piece of grass, and we measure the circumference of the foot of the elephant, and that is 2.5 times. If you measure the circumference and put that same measurement 2.5 times, you will get to the shoulder height of the elephant, and it's almost exact. So normally an average size of an elephant, the circumference would be in the regions from about 1 meter to about 1.3 meters. Obviously the bigger the elephant, the smaller the elephant, the foot size will be different accordingly. But that's a nice way to also work it back. If you can judge the shoulder height of the elephant, then you could divide that by 2.5 and you'll get the circumference of its foot. And as mentioned previously, you don't really see this coming from the females and the breeding herds. There's not this playful behavior. They generally come in, have their drink, cool off, and off they go. Yes, the babies will play around in the mud, but you'll generally notice that it's more so the males that engage in the real fun play than the females. They're a lot more reserved and a lot more sort of worried about what's going to be happening next to engage in this playful behavior that the males do. And I hope these rain clouds keep building and keep rolling on in, and there's lots of rain coming for Madikwe. We can only hope. See, that one bull's now gone off and taking out his frustration on the blue wildebeest, chasing them around. So we're slowly heading towards the end of the show. I hope you've all enjoyed the wonderful sights from the different waterholes and enjoyed the discussions. And as per usual, there's lots of action coming your way. Later on, there will be the sunset safari. The naturalists all out to see what they can find. And as per usual, I hope they find lots and lots of predators and everything else in between. So don't go anywhere. There is still lots to come. Always got to say thanks to the wildlife for being the stars of the show. What a wonderful concept that we can jump around to all of these different waterholes across Africa. And thanks to the whole WildEarth team. You guys rock. Without you, it would be possible either. As you see some helmeted guinea fowl coming through in the background on the right. So it's almost like the elephants have heard me saying that it's just about the end of the show, and they're also moving off now. I'm going to go do some important stuff other than fighting and playing. I'm going to go off and feed and get the calories required to sustain those massive bodies. So that's it from me for now, folks. Enjoy the rest of Saturday. Bush greetings. Salagahle. Cheers. Just make sure that you do register so you can send those comments and questions through, or if you just want to have a chat with us, go onto our hashtag WildEarth on Twitter, also known as X, or just go onto the YouTube channel. Yes, indeed. Well, if it's your first time checking this highlight show out, well, what we're going to be doing, I'm going to discuss one or two of the clips around here, what we've been seeing over the last 24 hours, as well as Amy is getting ready outside there on Wendy, and then she's going to tell her plans for the afternoon, and I'm also going to give you our plans for the afternoon. But it is a beautiful afternoon. It was raining a little bit earlier on, at around about maybe 12, 1 o'clock this afternoon. We had a bit of a shower, which is quite nice, but the humidity has increased quite a bit. That is perfect just to go around on safari and see what we can find. But anyway, further ado, I think let's get to the first clip. And well, it is an amazing sighting that we had yesterday afternoon. It was actually a male giraffe that we have that we've seen before, funny enough, Panda and myself, last year during, I think it was the beginning of last year, so it's amazing that he is still hanging around. But yeah, let's go and take a look at the first clip for the afternoon. You can straight away see it's a male. The head is the shape of the head. You can see on the forehead, it's got this. I didn't introduce us, huh? It's got like a bump that's coming out. So it's like a calcification protrusion. So I forgot to introduce it. It's pretty much calcifying there, and it actually gets this kind of a nice bump on the head. So what they use that for is, in the heavier the head, the better punch it can give to its opposition. So if it's challenging another male, they call it necking. That's strange. And they'll hit each other's bodies with their heads, and to try and topple the other one over, or even try and knock the other one out. He's coming to say hello there. He's walking very funny. He's got a funny back left leg. Hey? You see that?
Yeah, we've seen this before.
You've seen him?
Yeah, I think I was with you as well, by the junction of the torchwood there.
Oh, yes, that's it, yeah, that we saw him a long time ago. Yeah, we saw this male long time. That's right. You know, Panda, you got a good memory. You're like an elephant.
So we saw him long time, like last year. Sometime last year and sometime we actually saw this male with that wonky back left leg. That's right.
I don't know what's wrong with it.
Broken its hip or something. You can see his hardly can put actually much pressure. Ooh, that looks very. Ooh, that looks sore. Hey, nah. But clearly he's not in pain. He's been like that for such a long
time. So.
He's used to it. Hey, my boy, but you're still in good condition, so. And very relaxed with the vehicle coming towards us, so he hasn't got any issue.
Well, that was nice. Nice to see that male giraffe again, and I thought there was definitely nothing wrong with his hip. It was actually at the bottom of his foot. It looked like maybe like a break or something just above the hoof, and it just kind of grew used to it, and yeah, it seems like he was not having any pain there. So very nice to see the giraffes again. We've been lucky this over the last few weeks. We've seen a few giraffes aside. We had a nice journey of giraffe the other day coming through from the south into Djuma. I think it was like 5 or 6 individual males that came in, so that was quite nice, and always interesting, always interesting to see them. So yeah. Martin, yeah, look, a thing that is a thing. Lions will try and see. They'll take a look and they'll see. Well, there might be a little bit of an injury to that giraffe, and take that opportunity. I mean, we've had lion prides here, like the Chilala pride that used to hunt giraffe. They were specialists at hunting giraffe, and like a male like that, if that Chilala pride had to see that male now. Well, of course, the Chilala pride's only one female now, but back in those days, if this male had to cross paths with that pride, and what they will do, they will actually start chasing him, and they'll actually force a giraffe to topple over. So they'll force a giraffe to run into maybe a drainage line, so it has to go down like an embankment and all that, and it'll fall over, or they'll force him to run into like a real rocky area as well. So running into rocks and all that, and trying to maneuver over those rocks, and eventually they will fall over like that. So no, Linda, no.